Digital Infrastructure Accord in a few moments. But this is a really energetic, vibrant, exciting summit, really showcasing Asia Pacific and India as a genuine tech leader. There's a real buzz in the air, and it's very noticeable as soon as you walk through the door, even if you have to wait a few minutes to get through security. And this event really represents a crucial part of that story. India is a global tech leader. Asia Pacific is increasingly a global tech powerhouse, and data centers are an essential for that leadership in artificial intelligence. The building data centers to meet that demand, obviously, which is essential for the region, but it's also essential that data centers are built sustainably and innovation meets that need for sustainability, which is why the sector are innovating and focusing so much on sustainability. And I think it's notable that planet is one of the sutras of this event, and I think that's very welcome. A key plank of the focus of sustainability from the data center sector in the region will be the Sustainable Digital Infrastructure Accord, which is emerging. We'll be launching this in the spring, in March or April. But this is a really useful session to talk about the high-level goals of the SDIA, and we'll be discussing this in more detail over the next few minutes. So we've got a really stellar panel to discuss this over the next hour. Delighted to be joined by Ms. Aruna Sundarajan, who is the chairperson of the Broadband India Forum, and we're really delighted to have the partnership of the BIF this afternoon. Also joined by Bimal Khandelwal, who's the CEO of ST Telemedia Global Data Centers India, by Alexander Smith, who's the Principal for Global Infrastructure and Energy at Google, and by Sukrit Anand, who's the Vice President Investments and Strategy at Digital Connection. Thank you very much to all of the panel for making time this afternoon. I'd like to say a little more about the APDCA and what we are looking to achieve. So the APDCA is composed of 10 co-location data centers in the Asia Pacific region. Our goal is to support policy deliberations and foster informed discussion on building a secure and sustainable digital future. Between us, the APDCA members have 250 data centers in the APAC region. This includes 42 completed data centers in India and 15 under construction. As I say, we're also delighted to partner with Broadband India Forum, a non-partisan technology forum and think tank representing India's broadband digital infrastructure and emerging technology ecosystem. It's important to note that sustainability has been and will continue to be a real priority for the data sector industry in the region. And this is summarized by the ongoing work regarding the Sustainable Digital Infrastructure Accord. This is a collaborative effort to promote and advance sustainability in the sector by establishing shared voluntary targets that reflect the diverse climatic and environmental conditions across APAC. It's inspired by the European Union's Climate Neutral Data Center Pact, but I think it's important that to note that Asia Pacific is a more diverse region in terms of climate, and also does not have a single regulator in the way that the European Union does, which makes it all the more important for this to be an important collaborative effort between partners. The objectives of the Sustainable Digital Infrastructure Accord are: one, to establish a regional baseline of industry commitment to complement national standards and policies. And this is the first APAC-wide baseline of industry commitments. And second, to create a structured platform for government-industry dialogue and collaboration to facilitate knowledge exchange on what is realistically achievable, grounded in data and evidence, and enable joint discussions on how to raise the bar further, drawing on regional and global best practice and shared experience. We are still finalizing the details of the SDIA, but we can say these will be divided into 4 different categories. The first is energy efficiency, which will look at PUE targets, and these targets will be reconsidered on an annual basis. The second is looking at the amount of clean energy which is used within data centers, particularly carbon-free and renewable energy coverage. And also looking at international best practice, such as solar, wind, hydro, and nuclear energy, as well as renewable energy procured directly by consumers or operators. The third target will be around water use, assessing local water stress and implementing various water management plans. And obviously this will be a different target in water stressed areas than in other areas. And the fourth element will be around the circular economy, with data centers looking to set a high bar for circular economy practices, including measures to consider the opportunities to manage waste heat for all new projects, as well as considering issues such as embodied carbon. Now, as I say, the exact targets are still being discussed, but these 4 areas where we're finalizing the targets represent a really bold baseline for the industry in the region, and they also show the genuine priority that is being given to sustainability in the region by the entire industry. An important thing is that this is a collaborative initiative which includes not only the APDCA members, but we're also discussing with various hyperscalers and have engaged governments in the region, and we've received a positive response from governments in the region on this. What will this achieve? It will achieve a common APAC-wide baseline to inform national and regional policy frameworks. We'll create a structured platform for government-industry engagement. We regard the governance mechanism as something where governments and industry can formally discuss these issues and learn around these issues. And also will help spur the industry to further accelerate and innovate on these issues. We look to be launching hopefully March or April. We are actively discussing these issues with stakeholders, including hyperscalers and governments. So we hope to be launching this soon with detailed targets and frameworks. But can I just conclude by saying this is extremely important for the industry. As demand for data centers has increased with the surge of AI, as the importance of AI for the entire Asia-Pacific economy has become clear in terms of meeting national goals, it's also become clear that data centers will continue to innovate to ensure good and best practice in sustainability. The SDIA will provide a real framework to discuss this and a real baseline to measure this against. And this is something we want to involve local data center providers, local governments, and other associations in this. So we really delighted to see such a good turnout in the room and such enthusiasm for sustainability within the data center space. But really looking forward to hearing from the practitioners on the panel. I would love to ask Ms. Sundaranjan to either step up or speak from the table, whichever you prefer. Brilliant. And talk more about this from a Broadband India perspective. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, thanks, David, for setting out the context and what we hope to achieve during this session, but subsequently as well. Thanks to the APDCA, the Broadband India Forum, which I have the privilege of representing, and METI for bringing this very important topic into the heart of this summit. Until a few years ago, if one were to ask what was the single most overriding existential issue that the planet faced, it was about sustainability and energy use. And this was the position until AI came and began to emerge both as an existential threat and as an opportunity. But I'm glad that this session and this theme is actually taking us back to the original issues, which is that even AI must take into account the fact that first and foremost we need to ensure the sustainability of the planet. Otherwise, AI would become irrelevant and meaningless if the existential threat that this can pose is not addressed. Some people may imagine that it's a bit of an exaggeration to call this issue existential threat yet. There are estimates which put the use of energy for the digital part of the ecosystem alone at anywhere between 8 to 10% in the coming years. And it's possible that it could even move beyond that. And therefore, it is not entirely an exaggeration to say that sustainability is absolutely key. The summit's 3 chakras, leading with the planet, acknowledges the preeminent importance of this issue. And therefore, we are very keen to hear from the discussants because they represent the industry that is driving this, and we would like to hear their thoughts on how they are thinking about sustainability and how all of us can come together to make sure that the sustainability of the planet is indeed ensured. This theme also has specific relevance for India because there are estimates which suggest that India's data usage can be anywhere between 15 to 20% of the world's data usage, given the kind of population that we represent, and the fact that we are in the process of becoming an increasingly intensive digital economy. When we look at the number of data centers and the data center capacity in India, it is estimated to be fairly modest in terms of the data usage. But this is set to change. As you all know, hyperscalers, beginning with Google, have announced very ambitious plans. I was delighted to hear from Alexander that, things are indeed moving very fast. We know that the minister has announced that the total amount of investment in this field is somewhere around $90 billion, if you look at the total. And it's possible that this would go up even more, given that US alone is likely to invest anywhere between $700 billion to $1 trillion in building up this kind of energy and data center capacity. So in India, it is estimated that the data centers may triple or quadruple electricity consumption by 2030, with India becoming Asia Pacific's second largest data center power consumer, and David already referred to this. The question, therefore, for this session is not, should India really worry about data center use? Because I think we're past that. It's already demonstrated that we do need to be concerned. But how can India use this opportunity to accelerate a cleaner, more reliable, more sustainable grid? The good news here is that India is one of the few large economies which has actually been working over the last few years to build up its renewable energy resources. So as of last year, India had built around 220 gigawatt of renewable and other non-fossil capacity. And the target is to go up to 500 gigawatts of non-fossil capacity and net zero by 2030. 61% of our energy needs are hopefully to be met through renewable energy. Now, data centers will certainly be anchor customers for this transition. Sustainability, of course, is not only about energy use. It is first and last about the communities and ecosystems that host this infrastructure, and related to that, the resources, the critical resource of water. So cooling and water are where the trade-offs are beginning to become the most visible. It is estimated that a single hyperscale facility can use up to 1.5 million liters of water a day for cooling, or roughly 25 million liters a year per megawatt of IT load. In India, where 18% of the world's population lives on about 4% of freshwater resources, that footprint matters enormously. Investigations around emerging AI data center clusters in Greater Noida, for example, have already captured local anxieties about falling groundwater tables, bore wells, and so on. So can we think of creating water and recycling water so that we are able to ensure that the water resources of communities are met? The Pacific region adds one more layer of complexity. From Singapore's experiments with moratoria and a green data center roadmap, to Australia's debates over water permits, to Malaysia's push for AI-ready campuses in water-stressed corridors, policy makers have to think about improvising and innovating under very, very diverse climatic, economic, and grid conditions. Without coordination, there is a real risk of fragmentation. Each country, and sometimes each state or city, could end up with its own bespoke checklists, which would mean that our efforts could get very badly fragmented. This is exactly the gap, I believe, that the Sustainable Digital Infrastructure Accord, the SDIA, which David presented here, seeks to fill. A regional accord could be valuable for the industry, policymakers, and civil society to set sustainability targets for data centers that can help balance the delicate demand on already constrained grids and water resources. For India specifically, and for this summit specifically, this conversation could not be more pivotal or more timely. The India AI mission will dramatically increase the demand for compute, even as the country races to triple its green energy capacity and manage acute water stress in many of the regions where data centers are clustering. I hope we can anchor these targets in triad that this summit has chosen so well. A planet that can sustain not only our digital ambitions, but the overall sustainability of the planet. With these few remarks, I'm looking forward to a very, very interesting discussion with our panelists.
Thank you very much indeed for those very important words. And I thought the point about avoiding fragmentation and having some level of baseline certainty via the SDIA is very important too. Now keen to bring in the panelists. If I can turn to Bimal first. Obviously over recent years we've seen the AI surge, data centers recognized as a really foundational infrastructure within the AI-fueled growth and that technological fueled growth which all APAC economies are looking to achieve. Um, could I just ask how you've seen the conversation change over recent years about sustainability, and particularly how you've seen the industry really innovate and prioritize sustainability as part of this growth?
Thank you, David, and thanks to APDCA, Broadband India Forum, and METI for organizing this. The topic, as Ms. Sundarajan said, could not have been better at this juncture and in this India Impact AI Summit. Well, let me start by saying AI and sustainability, they go hand in hand. They are two sides of the same coin. AI accelerates the progress, growth and efficiency, and sustainability gets in the purpose, resilience and build to scale. India is at the cusp of once in a generation digital and AI-led growth cycle, clearly driven by scale and demographic, cloud adoption, and AI, Gen AI, sovereign AI, and government regulatory interventions like DPTCA Act from a demand perspective, duly supported by the enabling ecosystem which takes care of the supply side. Well, as Ms. Sundarajan said, we are currently at 1.7 gigawatt of capacity from a data center standpoint. We grew 4 times over last 5 years. So we started with 400 megawatt in 2020. In 5 years, we are at 1.7 gigawatt. Let's keep in mind 3 years were COVID. Now from there, clearly, we believe we would be more than 6 gigawatt plus between 2030 to 2032. So that's the number we are looking at. And as we move ahead, a year passes, the number only increases from wherever we are. Now with this numbers in perspective, the data center industry is poised to grow. The key requirement, as we all heard, is the energy, and hence the discussion around the sustainability of the overall growth. Sustainability over past few years have been more of a what you call driven by compliance requirement or a policy driven at most, and what you call it interplay of the way things are to be seen. But over last few years, there has been a fundamental change, and there has been a maturity in the way the sustainability is being looked upon by the industry and the government and the regulators as well. The overall sustainability discussion, conversation has matured over time. And let me put this in 3 ways, the way I look at it. First and foremost, just from tracking the efficiency level, it has converged into a full-scale decarbonization at the country, at the industry level. So earlier, the companies were tracking the PUEs, which is important, but now they have a full-fledged plan and a program to be fully decarbonized over time. So they have a plan to get into a carbon net neutral. While they have a plan, there are roadmaps and the pathways that have been developed to get into a renewable energy, duly backed by the support and the policies by the government as well. That's first thing. Secondly, what has been realized is there is no one player who can get into a sustainability agenda that we have. The whole ecosystem has to work. Clearly driven by the customers, which in data center parlance, hyperscalers, they drive the overall sustainability agenda. Clearly, there has been asked as to the sustainability has to be there in all the contracts the hyperscalers are looking at. So it's clearly driven by the customer. Hence, the data center industry again is looking at it and taking it forward. Duly supported by the government and the regulators. So it's a full 360-degree perspective which is there, and that's what will make it happen, and it's making it happen. So that's the second thing. Thirdly, what we have seen is earlier it was seen as a more of an operational optimization with regard to sustainability, let's say PUE effectiveness, the water usage and all. Now, what we have seen and is happening is it's gone at the design level. And nothing better at time like this when we are at a stage to take off as far as the overall capacity is concerned. Over last 3 years, where the major capacity has come and what we see is going to come, clearly the focus is at the design level to get the right technologies and the equipments which will ensure that we get the best of the technologies to take care of the sustainable agenda. So clearly, it goes at the conceptualization phase wherein things are planned in a manner that the sustainability agenda is not pushed at a later point of time. It is taken care of at the conceptualization level. So in a way, sustainability is not only influencing and impacting how we build, where we build, what we build. Sustainability is at the core of the data center design and the delivery and of course the operations as well. That's it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Some really important points there, including that the SDA is very much an industry-first initiative. The industry is taking the lead in setting this baseline. And the importance, as you made the point, Bimal, of technological advance helping to meet the sustainability issues is really important. Innovation is so important to addressing sustainability. Very keen to bring Alex in now. Alex, I know as a former Googler that sustainability has always been a priority for Google within data centers. We'd love to hear more about how you see the kind of regional approach to sustainability and how you're approaching this now.
Certainly, and I'll steal your microphone whilst there. Look, let me join Bimal and just say a big thank you to the APDCA and Broadband India Forum, together with MeitY and the Government of India, for convening us here. This is a really amazing week that's full of opportunity for us to get the AI agenda right. And I think, as Ms. Sundarajan mentioned, this is such an important conversation, and I think one of the most important conversations that needs to happen in this venue this week. Because you cannot have an AI future without robust, digital, AI-ready infrastructure. That is the reality of part of the trade-off that we face here. However, I think there are a couple of really positive pieces of news that I sort of want to frame up as we think about this discussion. The first is that the discussion around sustainability and digital infrastructure is not entirely net new. You know, if we think about the migration into cloud that started happening, you know, a decade and a half now ago, that was largely driven by sustainability and efficiency metrics. You know, as organizations and enterprises looked to move old server rooms that were super inefficient into the cloud, whether that's operated by hyperscalers or others, you saw amazing efficiency dividends that enterprises have been able to gain over the last decade and a half. Now, the good news with AI on that journey is that we are really still at the starting line. And I don't want this to come out the wrong way, because AI will evolve in different ways and none of us really know just yet where we'll be in 10 years' time. But it is likely true that artificial intelligence now is the most inefficient that it's ever going to be. And that there's significant upside, and part of this goes to what Bimal was saying, the significant positive upside when it comes to the efficiency of these operations to be gained. And let me just give you a couple of recent data points. So at Google, our marquee AI product is obviously Gemini. And over a 12-month period, we recently released research about Gemini that demonstrated that it's basically now 33 times more efficient per prompt than it was at the beginning of that 12-month period. That's incredible when you think about it. Like, I think many of us have become very spoiled in the industry by Moore's law and thinking about the incredible exponential growth and pace of acceleration that we've, witnessed over the last half a century. I have every reason to expect that AI will function the same way. In the last 5 years, the amount of compute capacity that one of our average Google data centers per unit of electricity can output has increased more than 6-fold. And so the first thing I'd say is research and innovation has a huge role to play across industry, across government, across stakeholders in the AI ecosystem, from design of chips through to design of the physical infrastructure itself, in giving us as a society and a global community the opportunity to scale AI and to do AI the right way. Because if we don't invest to make the infrastructure itself more efficient, the problem only builds and compounds as usage, adoption, and diffusion increases. And all of those things are what we want to see and what many in this building will discuss throughout the course of this week. But as that happens, the only way for us to scale is to do it more efficiently than ever before. But I think that this is also an example where industry has not needed to be dragged kicking and screaming to this sustainability discussion. That sometimes happens as we sort of look to decarbonize different sectors of the economy in recent decades. And I'd say part of that is also what Bimal pointed to, which is, at the end of the day, sustainability is good for business. And there is very significant, strong alignment, I think, on this topic between most regulators, most governments across APAC, and most industry players. Now, I'm not going to pretend that it's a uniform operating field. That's never the case. But what we hear from our enterprise customers with Google Cloud, what we hear from our consumer customers who are using products like Search and Gemini, all of which is underpinned by AI today, is that they want to make sure that we are doing it in a responsible way. So what does that mean? Look, at least speaking for ourselves, we've tried to set a number of moonshot objectives, set very, very high, ambitious targets for us to reach. One of which includes, since 2017, we've now been 100% matching renewable energy with all of our data center operations globally. We are still seeking to operate off of 24/7, 100% carbon-free energy by the early 2030s. We're currently sitting, close to two-thirds of that. And it also means, as Ms. Sundarajan mentioned as well, that we need to think very, very carefully about what the local communities need, and that includes water. And that includes balancing the trade-off between your power use efficiency and the amount of water that you're taking in. And so on Google's side, we've set, again, another ambitious moonshot that we aim to replenish 120% of the fresh water that's consumed in our data centers, again, by 2030. So it means that you're actually giving back more to the local watersheds and where you operate. And I think taken together, this presents us all, and it presents industry and policymakers alike, with an opportunity to do AI the right way. Because if it is done the right way, then there's no reason that it cannot be sustainable. There's no reason that it doesn't need to result in, mums and dads or startups paying more for their electricity bills. It means doing things like we've done here in India, as we've entered the market with initially first our Google Cloud data centers, and eventually with our recently announced investment into Visakhapatnam to build a gigawatt plus facility, that we have to be thinking about how do we pay for the transmission infrastructure and how do we bring more renewable energy online. In India already, we've invested to bring over 185 new additional megawatts of renewable energy onto the grid, and to spread it around different locales where it makes sense, not just from an economic perspective, but also from a community perspective, to bring those net new resources onto the grid to ensure that operations are as efficient as possible and are as green as possible. Now, at the scale that AI needs to move, it does mean, and we can talk about this a little bit if we sort of want to talk about some of the policy considerations here, it does mean that industry needs to move very, very closely with regulators and with policymakers to get the balance right. And I'd say what's right for different parts of India is not necessarily the right approach for rural Australia. I'm from Australia, for those of you who don't know, Or, you know, for parts of Southeast Asia where their constraints might look different. You might come from a water-rich area that is land constrained. And so how you think about land as a sustainability constraint is also very, very important. We need to think about this end to end. So let me stop there, but I'm happy to talk more.
Thanks so much, Alex. I think doing AI the right way is a really powerful way of approaching this. And as you say, as AI gets more efficient and innovation happens more and more, then AI can and will be green. Can I bring Sukhrit in now? I'd love to hear from you about how you see the importance of sustainability and some of the innovation which you've been seeing in this arena.
Sure. Thanks everyone. And just reflecting on what all my co-panelists said, I think one thing is established, that power has emerged as a protagonist in this AI growth story. And I would actually like to talk some numbers from an India perspective. I think last week it was announced that India added around 52 gigawatt of new generation capacity. Around 70% of that capacity was non-fossil fuel capacity. So I think, adding to that, our non-fossil fuel capacity in generation actually exceeded the fossil fuel generation for the first time. So I feel India that ways is extremely well positioned in the entire APAC region to take on this AI and power challenge that comes along. And I think we have the infrastructure, base infrastructure ready and in place. Now the responsibility is on the industry, the operators, the users, the hyperscalers, the power providers to actually integrate sustainability and energy into the base design itself. I can actually speak about ourselves, how we are thinking through this infrastructure. We are actually thinking through it in a power first format. And what this means is we are looking at infrastructure from two base pillars, that is scalability and sustainability. And I would like to deep dive slightly more into the sustainability bit. We are actually, as I think Bimal mentioned, we are trying to integrate sustainability in all the base elements of the life cycle of building a data center, right from designing to execution and even operations. And when we are thinking in this format and we are able to bring the entire ecosystem together, I think we'll be able to achieve the desired KRA or the targets that we have, the net zero goals that the hyperscalers have and all our customers have. So that's how we need to think through as an ecosystem. And we feel India is extremely well positioned in the entire APAC today to be a base for this global infrastructure.
Thank you very much. We'll have time for questions from the audience. Can I just pick up very briefly, Alex, to your point about very, very different climates and very different conditions in different parts of Asia Pacific? Obviously, you've got Singapore and Malaysia, which are tropical, and you've got other parts of Japan which can be very cold. You talked about parts of Australia. How are you dealing with the different challenges that come with innovating around those sustainability issues?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what we've discovered, maybe unsurprisingly, is that a one-size-fits-all solution to sustainability is probably too simple of a solution. You know, I'll give you an example. We are looking at a number of projects where you can build data centers potentially in far more remote and rural locations. Now, often in those locations, they tend to be more water scarce than you will have on the periphery of well-populated jurisdictions and locations. And I mention that because the sustainability trade-off suddenly looks very, very different. If your objective is simply to, you know, minimize your power use or to make your data centers as power efficient as possible, the best way to do that is to ensure that you are water cooling your facilities. But and this is where Ms. Sundarajan's point comes, that there is the potential for data centers to use significant amounts of water. If you're doing that in a water scarce area though, that I would say to you from a sustainability perspective is probably not the right answer for that region. And that if you want to bring that digital infrastructure to those communities, you should be looking at alternate design mechanisms like air-cooled data centers that, yes, use a bit more power, but significantly less water, so that you're not drawing from the local watershed and putting nearly as much strain on those communities as you would otherwise need to do. The challenge that policymakers have is to have in any framework or any sort of guidelines or policy requirements that they're setting for industry, that type of flexibility that recognises there are real technical trade-offs in the sustainability exercise that need to be balanced. And that's just one high-level example, which I think really touches on two of the most prominent sustainability considerations, being water and energy. But it goes right the way through the building codes in terms of materials used, thinking about local sourcing first, and how you manage the entirety of the supply chain that really needs to be taken into consideration. So, like many complex industries, there's a lot of nuance here, but we should be taking an evidence-based, technically informed approach that underpins our sustainability approach in a given jurisdiction, because otherwise this one-size-fits-all approach, I worry a little bit, will be sort of copy-pasted, which can lead to some suboptimal solutions.
Thank you very much. Could I bring Bimal and Sukrit in now? Just about, obviously this is not something industry can do alone. So just wondering for your thoughts on what the policy interventions might need to be to ensure sustainability and innovation around the data center space. Bimal?
May I? Okay. But before I get into it, David, a couple of thoughts that I had on the discussion that we have had so far. So clearly, as Alex said, from a water usage perspective, the industry is more of now tilting towards air-cooled chillers, where we don't have fresh water available. And in India, we know it's a scarce, water is scarce. But then we have to balance out the overall power usage there, and the technology has evolved, whereby the overall chiller system, they have a closed loop water system, whereby the water evaporation is also minimal. So as such, that the water usage in an air-cooled chiller with the latest technology is almost negligible, and they have become power efficient as well. So that's the decision one has to take depending upon different geographies one is into. But in India, we are seeing air-cooled chillers getting prevalent more. From a sustainability perspective, RE, different states have different regulations whereby the industry at large is able to have a runway to get into 65% of their power consumption through green, meaning it's a green power up to 65%, and they are cost effective as well. So industry is on the path to get there, and we as an organization are already there in most of the states that we operate, and 3 of our data centers are 100% green as well. And I'm sure we have examples of that in other organizations in the data center industry. Now, coming to the government enablement, David, clearly there has to be a way to bridge the gap between the policy and the execution at the government level. In 2022 budget, data center as an industry was categorized as an infrastructure status. And since then, we have seen the budget announcement of 2026 as well, whereby a tax holiday for 22 years for a foreign company taking capacity from an India data center company, I think it's never heard of. I have a 30 years of tracking of the budgets. I don't think I have heard such a huge tax exemption holiday for any industry and of this size. So I think this is big. Now, the point I was referring to is, and over and above these two announcements, there have been data center policies shared by the 10 state governments as well. Now, all in all, while the intent is there, there has to be a mechanism to fast track the intent and ensure that the execution happens faster. That's uh, uh, first thing. And then I think, yeah, that's it, David. So, Krit.
So I think so we have actually invested significantly in power infra. We have actually set up very recently an on-site substation as well in one of our sites. Uh, we have we have been actually very well supported by some of the local authorities, the agencies, and thanks to the local government, the project has really been executed at a very exceptional speed. I think the only thing that we all need to invest as a group is the last mile interconnection, I would say at the grid level. I think we have the generational capacity, the plants are there, but the last mile interconnection into the grid is something that we all need to kind of invest more so that power can reach the places where it needs to be. That's one of the requirements.
They, yeah, you may go ahead.
Sorry, I would just jump in with a couple of quick things that I think are important for policymakers to consider in this space. The first is, I think long-term policy certainty is a precondition for this industry to succeed in any given market. This really is about infrastructure investment, and investors are thinking about infrastructure for AI over 20 to 30-year time horizons. So whether it is green energy open access schemes, whether it is the preconditions for investing, whether it is efficiency targets, whether it is taxation requirements, those things need to be made clear for investors because of the long-term nature and the scale of the stakes that are involved. The second thing I think policymakers should really think about is speed. Industry is looking to move really quickly and is looking to move at scale because that's what the market is demanding. And I think that policymakers and regulators need to try as best as possible to work with industry. You know, we're seeing some jurisdictions across APAC where you've got wonderful renewable energy zones that can be brought online within sort of 24 to 36 months. But the transmission infrastructure might not be able to get permitted for 10 years. And like that's causing some of the real sustainability constraints where green electrons just cannot flow fast enough and far enough, and ultimately it breaks some of the economics of building the infrastructure in a sustainable way. That to me falls into the category of totally fixable problems if industry and policymakers can align and work on it closely together. I think the third thing is like we've got to think really carefully about the electricity markets that we're building across, you know, not just India. I think there are lots of good lessons to be learned from India across Asia. But there are other markets that have been far more constrained, for example, in the ability to do things like corporate power purchase agreements. I think that markets where you have greater flexibility, greater investment being driven into solar projects, hydro projects, wind projects, and the ability to then unlock that generation with new transmission, those are the markets that are really going to succeed here, not just with digital infrastructure, but ensuring that it is built in a sustainable way.
David, if I may add, see, currently, from the concept stage to the go live of any data center capacity, currently it's longish, right? The demand is huge. Now, if India has to move ahead in the curve with respect to other regions, what is required is to build large digital infrastructure zones by the state governments and governments where they identify huge land parcels, have power infrastructure built in advance over there, and the connectivity as well. That could fast forward the overall data center ambition that we have as a country, and we should take it forward that ways. We have seen pockets of such things happening in different states. If I may take name, let's say, and then it's done in an not in so organized manner. Let's talk of Ambattur in Chennai. Now, one could see it's a cluster of data centers getting developed. Now, it's by chance, it's not by design, right? Similarly, if you look at Kolkata, again, a small Salt Lake, place near Salt Lake, you can see 5-6 data centers coming up there. Navi Mumbai, if you look at all the data centers are there. Now, it's not organized rightfully. And hence, if we have to move forward on a faster track in our ambition, a larger digital infrastructure zones with this facility could help the cause.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we're about to run out of time, so we're not going to have time for questions from the floor. There's a rather intimidating ticking clock which is going down to my left. If I can just ask the panel just to briefly sum up in 30 seconds to a minute or so. If I can start with Sukrit.
Yeah, no, so to sum up, I think India as a country within the APAC region is positioned extremely well. We just need to do the execution right. Power, AI go hand in hand, and that's the need of sustainability. And we just need to do the execution right, and we'll emerge as one of the leading infrastructure providers in the region.
Thank you. Ms. Sundararajan.
And what we've heard is very encouraging, because clearly each of them is a little ahead of the curve in thinking about what needs to be done. So clearly any initiative where industry takes a lead in this area, I think would be an optimal approach. And then, of course, policy will look to align itself and enable that kind of, those kind of frameworks. One question that I wanted to ask was, if each of you can tell me, one thing that you would want the Indian government or the respective state governments to absolutely do, anything that kind of showstopper, if you can just indicate that.
Well, I already said that, and then before I get there, what I may want to assure to all of us, and which is what I can see through happening, is data center industry for sure has taken off. AI is further accelerating it. Clearly, it's the backbone of the economy, and the overall GDP growth that we are seeing of 6.5–7%, clearly 100 basis point bump up we can easily see through coming our way, let's say in 2 years, 3 years time. Sorry, I didn't answer your question, but I thought it's important for me to share this.
I think one thing would be uniformity of green power norms, like banking, solar. So each state today has different norms. I think uniformity will help bring consistency in implementation.
Look, I would say the Indian government has set a very bold vision. And I think that at the moment, when you look at the investment that is going to this sector, it is heading down the right path. And I'd say the Indian government, if my top tip would be optimistic. Feel confident that the skills, the knowledge, the talent exists in this market to do AI the right way. India has made incredible strides in the renewable energy economy. It is making investments across its networks to ensure that the energy infrastructure can support the transfer of those electrons. I would say similar comments that it's really important to ensure uniformity of access across states so that the benefits can be very broadly shared and can be really sort of penetrating deep into tier 2, tier 3 cities. So that, like, yes, there are benefits from clustering, but there are also benefits that come to local communities from spreading the supply chain, spreading the jobs, and ultimately spreading new renewable technologies to industry. So I would be very, very optimistic about all of that. I think overall, to sum up, I'd say we are still in the first innings of AI. It is not too late for us to get this right. And I think that industry and governments across this region are very, very forward-leaning and have a huge investment window in front of them. But the time to move is now. The investment window and the capital allocation window is open right now. It probably won't be in sort of 5 or 6 years, and so now's the time to get it right.
Thank you. And some good cricketing imagery to finish things off as well. I think this has been a really fascinating, really interesting and optimistic discussion. I think we've seen how important AI and data centers are to the future of the Indian economy and the APAC economy. But we've also seen how serious the industry is about sustainability and, just to use Alex's great words again, to do AI right. I think that's really important. I would urge you to follow the APDCA on LinkedIn, where we will be launching the Sustainable Digital Infrastructure Accord over the next few months. I want to thank everybody for attending this fascinating discussion. Particularly want to thank the panelists. Could we please thank the panelists in the usual way, and have a good rest of summit.
Thank you so much, all the panelists here. We had an amazing session, and thank you everyone in the audience for joining us. We have a small memento for the panelists here. So I request Aruna ma'am, if you can give the memento to our panelists. Yeah, and I request Brigadier Anil Tandon, Director General Broadband India Forum, to please present the memento to Ma'am Aruna. We have. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. We'll be having the next session here in 5 minutes. I request the audience to please leave the room for the new audience to come in. Thank you.